episode 14 of the Just an Insight podcast. We are back to a little bit of normality after all the WrestleMania madness of last week. As always, my name is Tim Backbeck. I am a writer, I am a lover of films, music and wrestling, but most importantly of all, I am your body and vehicle through this podcast. For my weekly little roundup that I like to do, don't know if you guys like it, but I like to do it. I like to put something out there. Everything kind of seemed to happen all at once again this week, all at the weekend. Apart from that, pretty uneventful working week for me, to be honest. My bands, The Divorcee, played a show last Friday in our hometown of Portsmouth, which was interesting. I think it's probably the best way to describe it. We stood out like a sore thumb, which isn't anything new, but hey ho. But the other bands that we played with were kind of quote unquote moshcore bands. I've got nothing wrong with that. I like a mosh as much as the next guy, but the weird thing that kind of happened was once we kind of got off, the next band came on, and it was almost like we were in their practice room with their mates, and yeah, it was just a bit bizarre. And even during their sort of makeshift mosh pit, one of the guys attitude adjusted one of his other mates, and yeah, just a bit mind-boggling, to be honest. The only other thing of note which I wanted to mention was I recently got to speak to one of my heroes in Converge frontman Jacob Bannon. Got to talk to him about his solo project Wear Your Wounds, which the self-titled album is out now. So yeah, I was really happy with this. I cannot thank Sean from Already Heard Enough for setting that up for me. So please head over to alreadyheard.com, have a little read of the interview. Jacob Bannon is one of like the most articulate guys I've ever kind of spoken to. He's really kind of open about how the whole sort of process of Wear Your Wounds came about. So yeah, go over there, have a little read. I'll put the link in the episode description for this as well, so please feel free to share that around. I'd really appreciate it. Anyway, enough of me chatting. On to today's episode. I had the opportunity to sit down with someone I've met a couple of times when his band have been touring over here in the UK, frontman of Full of Hell, Dylan Walker. Now, Full of Hell, as I've mentioned, one of those bands that I've been a fan of for years. I think I've caught them every time they've been over to the UK, I think. Don't hold me to that, but yeah. I also had the chance to actually put them on back in my promoting days, and meeting Dylan, he's just such a nice dude. He's really open. He's a really good guy to chat about music to. For example, before I actually called him on Skype to do this interview, he told me he was watching videos of Portal, so I think that kind of says everything about that dude, really. But it's not a bad way to pass your time. We talked about the band's new record, Trumpeting Ecstasy, about the aesthetics of the band, how their brand of kind of extreme music has evolved over the years, how Dylan's vocal range has kind of evolved through the years, and also what it was like for the band to hang out with Max and Igor Cavalera, which for me is something that's quite a mind-boggling experience, but God knows what it was like for those guys actually being there. Anyway, again, I'm rambling. I'm going on too long. I hope you guys enjoy my little chat with Dylan Walker, and I'll see you on the other side. Today on the Just an Insight podcast, I am joined by Dylan Walker, frontman vocalist of Full of Hell. Dylan, how are you doing?
I'm doing great, man. Thanks for having me.
No worries. Wanted to obviously touch upon a few things on this chat, but obviously with the show being called Just an Insight, we like to kind of almost go back to square one in a sense and get a little bit of history of the band. So if you can just kind of briefly go over how Full of Hell formed in the first instance, and obviously to how it become where we are today.
Well, our guitar player Spencer formed the band in 2009 with some other people, not even me.
Okay.
And yeah, they started playing some shows, just really like embryonic stages of the band. And I think he hated everybody in the band, so a couple of them quit, and one of them when the singer quit, I had met Spencer like immediately before that, and jumped on it because I'd never really met anybody before that was so obsessed and driven, with the idea of being in a band that just went on tour. That was our goal from the beginning, just to release music as much as we could and tour nonstop. And I guess since then, the rest is history. We've kind of just been touring since then, and it's kind of crazy to look at it now and think it's been like 7 or 8 years.
So,
but in a good way.
So how did you actually get involved? Was it a case of Spencer asked you, or did you kind of approach Spencer?
Well, I'd met those guys, seeing them at shows and stuff early on, because they don't live too far away from me, so his old bands would always play shows up here, and I'd heard that Full of Hell was like more of like a sludgier kind of like crowbar-y kind of sounding band. Yeah. So I was excited to see them, and it was pretty good when I saw them. But I had never talked to Spencer in my life. He's a really shy guy.
Yeah.
And we got the opportunity to talk after hanging out for 2 weeks. He finally said something to me, and it turned out we liked I hadn't really met that many people at that point in my life that like grindcore and noise and like screamo and just like chaotic stuff, and he liked all of that. So when his other bandmates were out of the picture, it was like, dude, fuck it, let's do that band that we always wanted. So yeah, that's kind of how it happened.
And had you been in bands previously yourself?
Mm-hmm.
Nothing notable. As a front man?
Yeah, I always, I the first band I was ever in was when I was a little kid, like 12 years old, 13.
Yeah.
And we started a band. We just wanted to have a metal band. We called it Rotting Carcass. It wasn't like Brilliant. It wasn't even death metal, though. It was just kind of like metal, and I wanted to play guitar in the band, but I'm not a very good guitar player, and no one wanted to sing, so they kind of just pushed me into it, and I found out it was very easy to make weird noises with my mouth. So
yeah.
I never, because it came to me so easily, I never did anything else in bands. It was like, this is what I want to do, because it took like little to no effort for me.
Mm. Well, funnily enough, that's kind of something that I wanted to talk to you about, was because obviously your vocals and your voice are quite unique within sort of like Full of Hell. So obviously, if somebody puts on a Full of Hell track, they instantly know that it's you, obviously, from the guitars and your voice. But something that I picked up on all of your records is the range and flexibility that you've got. So is that something that you've kind of practiced over years and developed, or as you say, is it just something that's come really naturally?
There wasn't any practice involved. I will say that within like the realm of Full of Hell, I've learned like so much about recording vocals and singing in general.
Mm.
So I'd been doing it since I was like, a preteen, like young guy, and I figured out I could have some range after like, really getting into listening to more like diverse extreme music. But I was still in this mindset of like, push as hard as humanly possible. It'll sound the best that way. And it wasn't really until the second Full of Hell LP that I realized that even live, I'd been singing with more of like a head voice.
Yeah.
And I hadn't done that on the first Full of Hell record, and I completely blew out my voice, like just yelling as hard as I could.
Oh,
and
God.
I think it sounds like shit, and I can't listen to it. It drives me insane. I can't go back and listen to that record. So it was always a learning process, but I never had any like vocal training, and I never bothered to practice, and I never had any idea of like warming up my voice. And even now, I'm a little like confused when people ask me like, if any friends or anything would ever ask, like, how do you do whatever? I don't have a good answer. I just like do it. And I think warming up would probably help me a little bit, but yeah, no, there's no real, nothing formal to it at all. It's just fun.
Yeah. And with, obviously, again, kind of on the same topic, obviously the progression with Full of Hell records, as a whole, the band has kind of progressed and changed within the realms of sort of grindcore, power violence, noise, whatever you want to call it. But for me, your vocals have kind of gone from being quite sort of screechy to quite sort of hard and guttural. Is that something that you've specifically chosen to do as the albums have gone along, or is it just the way that things have progressed?
Maybe it's because I'm an adult now.
Yeah.
No, I'm just kidding. But I don't know. I think I'm sure my vocal cords have changed a little bit over the years. When I found that head voice, it became more of like an inspiration from like an acid bath standpoint with like the pukey kind of sounding stuff. I just wanted to make like the most wretched noises possible, like that at least I was capable of. So I think wanting retching noises and becoming more guttural just kind of like became synonymous with each other in my brain. And my low range, I had a little bit of it when I was really young, but it kind of left me in my early 20s. But it's become like an important part of the band. So I had been doing them at shows more often, and I think they've defined themselves a little more, you know. So I mean, yeah, it just kind of came naturally. Things have come around. There was never like an intelligent plan around how to develop a voice for Full of Hell, though. Yeah, it just kind of happened.
And obviously, when we're now coming up to the release of your third album, and obviously the snippets that you guys have released so far have obviously been really well received from fans and kind of peers and things like that. But talk me through kind of the backing of the new album, because is there kind of any specific themes that you focused on lyrically? Was the writing process different at all? Because as you mentioned, obviously you're now obviously older and wiser as a band, so you're obviously a bit more of you're a bit more of an oiled machine. So were things a bit different this time around?
It was a little more fluid, I think. Those guys, Dave, Sam, and Spencer have been... Well, Sam's like the newest member. He's only been in the band for like a year and a half. But he's great. He's like maybe the best bass player we've ever had. But Dave and Spencer have been playing together for so many years now that I think their system's really coming around, and I've been really kind of inspired by Dave the past couple of years. He's just been like so driven, and same with Spencer. Spencer's always been driven at like level 11 basically. So these guys, they had a system worked out. They wrote the record as they've written every other record, where Spencer is coming up with these riffs in his head for weeks, and then he brings them to the practices, and they mull over them, and they try to flesh out some songs. And once they have a few songs, then like a musical narrative usually comes to Spencer, like an ebb and a flow, because since day one, we always wanted to create records that were like one long kind of movement, as opposed to chopped up songs. Now, we've kind of moved away from that just a little bit, because the occasional dead stop sometimes to like good results, but like a long movement was always kind of the inspiration, you know? Like a Neurosis record feels... We're not at the same scope, obviously, but a Neurosis record feels like a giant piece rather than maybe like isolated songs. So that's always important to his writing process. And lyrically, I wait for demos, but occasionally I'll just be driving down the road and something will just kind of click into my brain, and I'll have to write it down in my phone notes. Sort of all over the road. But I think this record, you know, a lot of the older stuff was pretty introverted as far as the lyrics went. So I never really had to pigeonhole myself or try to write like death metal lyrics or anything. Those guys kind of just let me have free reign and kind of let me push the aesthetic wherever I wanted it to be. So we've written about all kinds of stuff in the past, but this record is probably the most direct and forward. I mean, I can't say that current world events like haven't had an influence on the record. I feel like I'm in a pretty good place personally in my life, like mentally, but within my bubble, it feels like that. Outside of my bubble, which becomes repeatedly punctured every time I open my eyes and look around, it's really disheartening and infuriating and terrible and sad. And I don't know, I think it was really easy to draw on my disappointment with human beings in general. To write this record. And I've never been vocally anti-religion. It's a part of who I've been since I was a kid. My parents never forced religion on me, and I was just like always under the assumption that you know, I was an atheist. I never really felt it was necessary to really push it hard with Full of Hell, because the name is Full of Hell. It might be an Entomb reference, but most people read it and they think, oh, ooh, big bad evil band, anti-Christian band, real cool. But it really just kind of this is a pretty anti-Christian record. It just kind of came out of me. Like I didn't want it to be so on the nose, but I didn't want to. I've never had the misfortune of having to force anything, so I just didn't force it not to be something either. And
Yeah.
it just came out extremely anti-human, very anti-Christian. Just how it is.
Is that kind of tied in with the artwork? Because obviously the artwork's quite striking in what it is. So is that kind of tied into that kind of theme?
Well, it's funny. We got one of my favorite artists to do the art. His name's Mark McCoy. He was in Charles Bronson. He does Youth Attack Records.
Oh, okay.
All these amazing things. He's an amazing artist. Like, it's unbelievable. I'm a huge, huge fan. He did the artwork for the Merzbow collab as well.
Oh, yeah.
Our deal with Mark and with any artist really is I don't really want to encumber them with our maybe like our crappy vision of what we think the art should look like, because honestly we didn't really know exactly what kind of motif we were working with physically. So I gave him the title, the song names, the lyrics, and just let him go from there. And when he sent it back, honestly my first thought was like, oh no, this is really on the nose. Is it too much? You know what I mean? Like a nun's head on fire. But I sat with it for like 3 seconds, and then I was just like, you know what? If the shoe fits, I should just go. Like, honestly, should just go with it.
Yeah.
It's an on the nose record. It's fine. And the art is, I'm so happy with it.
Yeah.
I love it. It's very striking, like you said. I was really pleased with what he came up with.
Well, because I think from my kind of perspective as a fan, like everything that I've seen of your guys, the artwork is quite almost minimalistic in a sense, like obviously with kind of like collages and things like that. So to come out with something like this, I think it was quite a bold statement which is something new from you guys, which for me personally, I'd really like to see.
Yeah, I mean, we've taken minimalistic approaches before, but I agree. You know, sometimes it's good to be loud with things, and you know, I felt in the past that our music was so loud and extreme that maybe some minimalistic approach with the aesthetic could be a wise way to offset it. But I think maybe I've grown a little bit, and I realized that I think every bit of the band should be as over the top as possible. I think that's probably better. And also, you know, with this record in general, I think really just down to make a really driven hard record, because we just done 2 collabs with the Body, one which is just recorded and unreleased, but those are so far out of our wheelhouse and so different, and the artwork for that release was so just, you know, abstract and strange and not particularly any sort of way, that it was nice to just do a record where it was like, this is just full of hell.
Yeah. And so you mentioned previously that obviously you've kind of got a bit of free reign, obviously, like lyrically, but I think in general the way that the band comes across is that there are no barriers to, obviously you do kind of fit in that whole sort of extreme noise, grindcore kind of sound, but you do what you want with it. So has that kind of always been the Full of Hell ethos, is that you want to do what you want to do and that's kind of the end of it?
Oh, absolutely. Our main inspirations, especially the ones that have lasted and still shine through to this point, they had that ethos too, I think. I mean, a band like The Endless Blockade could have done whatever they wanted. They did do whatever they wanted. We're, like, you know, to cite Neurosis again, a huge influence for us and for so many of our peers. And even a band like Converge. Converge can do whatever they want.
Yeah.
You know? And it's nice because it always sounds like Converge. And Neurosis always sounds like Neurosis. And even a band like Swans, another band with like incredible scope and depth. Michael Yura does whatever he wants with his music. It changes, it morphs, and it's always him. So, you know, those people inspire us, and you know, I wouldn't put our music on that level at all, but they inspire us, and they can do what they want, and I really do feel like that if we felt the need to write like a slow record, or if we wanted to put out a record that was just noise, we could do it.
Yeah.
And maybe not everybody would appreciate it or get it, but I don't feel like it would be that off for us to do something like that. You know, the Body collabs are really different.
Yeah.
And we kind of just did them because we wanted to do them, because we're huge fans of the Body.
And kind of wanted to talk about that, because obviously you've done the one that was released, and I was unaware that you've done a second one. So, are you able to talk about the second collab at all?
I mean, I don't think there's any reason why I can't, but I mean, it's funny that when we did the first one, the only intention was to just do, for me to do everything I would want to hear on a Body record that I hadn't already heard.
Yeah.
And for them, I think just to make something with their friends. So there really wasn't any intention. But I definitely felt like when we were writing it, we wanted it to be a record that a lot of people could listen to and appreciate, even if they weren't necessarily into noise and all the things that we like. But it was so funny because a lot of what I heard from my friends was, wow, it's really harsh. It's kind of difficult to know what's going on. And it just kind of was like a smack on the head. I was just like, that's really dumb. So the second one is really much more like way out in deep space and way less accessible.
Okay.
So yeah, so the next one will be really extreme. So it's nice. It'll be nice to do something that's a little more out there, maybe. Is
it going to be the same kind of balance though? Obviously, like with yourself, sort of jumping in on parts of their songs and vice versa, or have you taken a different approach to this one?
Yeah, I mean, it's the same kind of approach where everybody's involved, but I mean, I don't think it sounds quite like the last one at all. Maybe, I mean, I don't want to say too much, but it feels a lot less organic, but in like a good way.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of hard to describe, and to be perfectly honest, we recorded it last summer when we finished that tour, so I don't even have the files myself, and I don't remember what it sounds like completely. I remember the act of recording it, I remember certain beats and hooks, and that's it. So yeah, but I'm excited. Maybe next year we'll get to put it out, and it's just another excuse to tour with those guys as much as we can.
And this is something that I find quite, obviously, not necessarily odd, but it's weird because obviously Trumpeting Ecstasy is your the third full of hell album, but
right.
you've been relentless in the work that you've done. I mean, like, you've done splits, you've done 7 inches, you've done collab albums. Is it just that you guys are constantly writing and you've constantly got material, or is it just that you want to always be in the studio recording as well as touring, just being active in any way possible?
I mean, it is a want, but it is because we're always writing. It's totally involuntary. Spencer can't stop writing. The whole point of doing this band, beyond like any other intention, is just to create stuff. That's like the whole point. It's just that there's no greater joy than releasing a record. I mean, at first touring was like, this is the best thing in the world. But as time goes on, it's making the records is the absolute best part of being in the band. And I don't think if Spencer tried, he could slow down. He just, as soon as we finish something, his brain's already, the gears are turning and he's working on other stuff. So that's, it's not even, it's like I said, it's not intentional. It's just kind of how we are. And I think it's the school we've been brought up in, like you look at like a band like Man is the Bastard or Bastard Noise. They never stop either. And or our friends in Thou is like hugely prolific. Or Merzbow maybe even most of all. They don't know how to stop. It's not in their nature just to slow down like that. And I'd like to think in a small way we feel that same kind of creative waterfall too. Just kind of keeps going. But and we want to slow down a little bit because I would like the release schedule to be a little more focused, because I think it's sometimes hard for people to follow along because there's always something going on and people miss out on things. But I don't know, it might not be possible. I guess how things go is how they go.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That's fine.
And obviously we've already kind of touched upon the work with the Body, and obviously you mentioned Merzbow, but so the whole kind of collaborative work, was that something that has been spoken about from an early stage from you guys, or was it something that came along naturally with the bands that you thought would be a fit with what you guys do?
We never talked about collaborating on that level at all. It never even crossed our minds that we would do something like that. I think our favorite collaboration in the early stages of the band was the Bastard Noise Endless Blockade collaboration. But I don't recall a conversation where we were like, let's do a full-length collab with somebody. So, I mean, that idea fell into our laps when we met the drummer, this live drummer who's like one of my best friends. His name was Balazs Pandi.
Okay.
He's from Budapest. He was in Brooklyn just like seeing shows and making music like he does, and he happened to come to a Phobia Full of Hell show. And he had no idea who we were, and thankfully he liked what he heard, and he started talking to us and, got in touch via email. And we realized who he was, and it was just kind of like, wow, this guy's a serious heavyweight. He's done so many awesome things over the years. And he put us in touch with Masami, who wanted to do a record together. It was just, I think for Masami, who's so prolific, I think it was like not like a huge difficulty for him to just be like, yeah, I've got a bunch of material. Let's do something together. So from there, then it was just like, oh my God. And again, we had never then after that had in the plans to do another collaboration, but that's kind of the nature of the body. They're just like, they're always collaborating.
Yeah.
So as soon as they kind of hit it off with us, I think they were just like, it just popped into their heads. Same thing with a second one. Would have never asked to do a second one, but he suggested it, and at that point it was like, well, why the fuck not? So yeah, it's been completely serendipitous.
Yeah. Obviously, a big kind of part of your sound is obviously the noise elements. And am I right in thinking, like back in sort of the early phases of Full of Hell, like you did just sort of solo noise projects to go alongside it?
Yeah, early in Full of Hell, Spencer had always had the idea to have kind of power electronics alongside the music, and an easy way for us to kind of experiment and play around with it was to do these short run tapes that we released. And they were just nice companion pieces where we were able to expand upon like lyrical themes on the records and just cool stuff like that. And obviously the pressure was lower. When I listen to that stuff now, it's funny how much we've learned since then.
Yeah. But
those were fun to make. Spencer was instrumental with those though. He did a lot of the stuff on the later ones. I started in tracks as well. First couple were all him, and then I would arrange them and put vocals over them and add samples and little stuff like that. But those were fun. We might do those again. I don't know. I don't feel the need to do anything in particular. Yeah. And it doesn't feel right to do one right now. So I just think it's on ice. Yeah. But the door's never closed.
And because obviously you have those kind of elements of noise still in the obviously the full lengths and some of the splits and things like that, where you're kind of almost like an accessible band within the kind of that kind of noisier side of things, because obviously where you play sort of like with hardcore bands and things like that, do you think that that's kind of opened people's eyes to that other side of kind of like the more harsher grindcore things because they've listened to you first?
Oh, absolutely. I think we're definitely like considered kind of an entry level, like gateway kind of thing for that kind of extreme music. And which honestly can be a point of contention, and which we've had to kind of grapple with over the years when people we really look up to or really like think that we're shit because it's considered basic, or we have like a following of hardcore kids. We kind of just play to whoever we want to play with, and we really did come up in like the punk and hardcore scenes, especially ethically and just the way we ran our band. It was just being a DIY hardcore band it's just there's so much to it. You know, there's a good community and tons of small spaces in the States to play, and it just worked for us. And where we grew up, you know, there's hardcore scenes. We grew up with hardcore kids. So we kind of just flitted around, and now even we've been doing more like death metal centric tours. So that's kind of out of the box too. Yeah. And those people, you know, along the same lines, sometimes literally have no fucking clue why the static is being layered over top of like a normal song. And yeah, I mean, anytime you put something like that in front of a person who otherwise would have never seen it, it's a good thing. You know, it's polarizing. Maybe they hate it, maybe they love it. And there's no greater thrill than the times when you meet like a 14-year-old kid who you meet him at a show and he's really into the band and he gets a t-shirt and a CD or whatever, and then you meet him a couple years later, and even if his project's really bad, he's like started his own noise thing, and he's emulating like things that you're into, or he's wearing t-shirts that you guys were wearing a couple years before. It's like the coolest thing ever. It's a really huge privilege to be considered like that kind of band, I think, you know, to any amount of people. I'm proud to be kind of like that band maybe that introduces people to a more experimental world of music.
Well, because if I go from a personal point of view, because I can't remember the year that I discovered you guys, but you know a good friend of mine, Dean Lloyd Robinson.
Oh yeah, old friends.
Yeah, so he kind of I'd heard you guys, but he'd kind of then put me on to other people.
Dude, he's the man.
Yeah, he's such a nice guy. But obviously with his projects, obviously Knifed Out of Existence, like I'm not the biggest kind of noise guy, but because I know that he knows his stuff, like I can get what he's kind of going, and I think that's kind of puts hand in hand. If you understand it from almost from an art perspective, then it kind of works, and you can kind of, as you mentioned, kind of open up other doors.
Absolutely, it's contextual, all of it, and you know, it's really something special to be able to at least accept that while it may not be your taste, it's valid, and that's kind of been something that I've really been trying to embrace the last couple of years, because I've always listened to like a ton of different styles of music, but you know, it's really fun to be a hater sometimes. But it's such a waste. It's such a waste of energy. If you really don't appreciate something, you know, move on from it. But there's just so much out there, and there's nothing more depressing to me than the guy that says all he listens to is, you know, one or two genres of music, whatever they might be. There's just so much out there. Dean was actually one of the first guys I met in the UK. That really seemed, in general, and who really seemed to kind of get where we wanted to go, and he was into like all the same stuff as we were. And I just remember meeting him at like one of our first UK shows ever, and we've hung ever since. It's a good guy.
Yeah. And well, I think that's kind of a good leap off point, because obviously you're coming back to obviously Europe and the UK later on in the year, and it always kind of seems to be a place that you always come back and always seem to enjoy and have fun with. So how did you kind of build up this relationship with the UK base? Because as I mentioned, it's somewhere that everyone seems to really embrace you guys.
I honestly don't know. Because the first time we went, I was dumbfounded at how cool the shows were for us. And I always attributed it to the fact that perhaps like there were bands that were maybe a little bigger than us that were kind of hyped over there, and I feel like England in particular really embraces a lot of styles that kind of make up our DNA. Like I feel like England's really into power violence and grindcore and noise to a lesser extent, and death metal, and you know, bands like Nails and stuff. Nails is huge in England. It's crazy. Nails shirts are like Slipknot shirts. They're everywhere. And it's awesome. And you know, we're us in the spectrum of like the Nails scene, their scene, it works really well. So I always figured it was the footwork of bands before us, and ever since the first time we went, that's the the one part of the world when we tour Europe that we always want to go back to is the UK. So we've been to the UK like 7 times, and it's always really cool. Made lots of friends.
Is there any
really
Is there any particular cities that really stand out for you over here?
I mean, obviously London's like a really crazy place to play. So our London shows are always, amongst some of my favorite. But Brighton's really cool. Leeds is insane.
Yeah.
There's so many sick bands in Leeds, it's ridiculous. And they have that venue, Temple of Boom.
Yeah.
Seriously, the Leeds scene is unfucking real.
It's ridiculous at the moment.
And all those guys are in like 8 fucking bands.
Yeah.
Like Afternoon Gentlemen, in particular, like one band where it's just like every single vocal style and extreme music in one fucking band.
Yeah.
It makes you laugh because it's so insanely sick and over the top. And we're touring with Famine again, at least for a couple shows, and in the summer. And we've toured with them before. Those are excellent guys. They're involved in that scene. And this band, Unyielding Love, is coming along with us. They're from Ireland. And they're just on a whole different tip. It's really cool. Well, they have serious vision. Awesome.
It's strange because I saw them because, again, relating back to Dean, ironically, he toured with them, I think it was last year. And a few of my friends kind of equated them to kind of like the UK equivalent of you guys. So it's kind of weird to see them on a tour with you, which is quite nice.
Well, we've known a couple of those guys for some time, and they're great musicians. And I think it's really cool when someone can say like, "Oh, this is the UK equivalent of you guys," and then you listen to it, and sonically it still has its own vibe.
Yeah.
Because there's actually a band in Japan that people say sounds like us too.
Okay, well
they're
called
Friendship.
The Friendship.
And yeah, very, very strange name for that kind of band. But they're really fucking sick. And when I heard them, I was like, this doesn't sound anything like us. But it's so awesome, that you can take that kind of DNA and swish it around. Not even just saying that anybody's influenced by us per se, but like that same kind of DNA that we're into, and then it comes out the other end and it's just its own beast. There's this band from the States who on paper were into like all the same stuff. They're called Yautja. They're into, just across the board, all these different kinds of extreme music and a lot of the same stuff we're into. But they sound so unique and so different from anything that we've ever done. But it's so over the top, but just in a completely unique direction. It's just really cool because it's all the same, a lot of the same components, but it's completely unique. It's cool how that happens.
And obviously, another big part of you guys, as you mentioned, when you first started, you wanted to just go out and tour kind of thing. And I think the Full of Hell live experience is completely different to what you have on record. And that's not to say that they're different entities, but I think if you listen to you guys on record, you get a different experience to what you have live. So do you kind of consciously think about your live aesthetic, or do you just kind of, once you're on stage, just let loose almost?
We just kind of go for it. I mean, there's definitely a plan. We have like a little roadmap set lists that tell us where we want swelling noise or whatever, little kinds of electronics need to be laced into the set, or to put samples and whatever. But I don't know. We just try to play the songs, as best we can, like any other band. And just, go as hard as we can. It's not always as hard as we want it to be, but we never fake it.
Yeah.
So if it's a little quieter than normal, then it's because we're feeling like shit, probably.
Well, because again, from a personal point of view, because I've had the pleasure of seeing you guys quite a few times, and as you mentioned, obviously Spencer's quite a shy guy. Yourself, from speaking to Dean, and I have actually met you before at one of the Brighton shows. You're very approachable, and like you're really sort of like a friendly guy to talk to. But once you're on stage, it's almost like you transform into someone else. So is that something that, again, is it just something that takes over you almost?
Yeah, it's kind of like a trance. I don't know. There's nothing ingenuine there. It's so freeing to play. I don't know. I feel it when we play, like through and through. I feel all of it, and it feels, it's very cathartic.
Yeah.
Not to sound, corny or anything, but that's it. It feels like something else entirely, and I'm glad I seem approachable. And, I think that's in my character. I just don't want to. I don't want anything we do to be like a put on to anyone, and I'm sure it could be perceived like that to someone, but none of it is. I mean, we play exactly how we want to play. We act how we want on stage, and off stage, act just as we would in real life, regardless. So I don't know. We're just expressing ourselves, man.
Yeah. And obviously something that you've started to do a lot more, and especially in the last sort of 2-3 years, is starting to support kind of like bigger bands, quote unquote, and play sort of bigger venues, but you're still also playing these kind of smaller DIY shows. So how do you kind of, one, sort of adapt yourself to the bigger stages? Because obviously I think your sound is obviously ideal for the smaller stage, but you've got to kind of to grow, you need to adapt to the bigger stages. And secondly, how do you kind of find audiences when you're touring with the bigger bands? Kind of, how do they kind of perceive you?
Well, first off, it's actually, there's no greater treat than playing both sizes of venues. Because when we do these package tours, we always play shows to and from them, because they always meet in like fucking Las Vegas or California, which is the whole way on the other side of the country. So we have to play shows to get there, and play shows on the way to get home. And honestly, there's no better feeling than the first day after the package tour, where we go and we play a warehouse somewhere, and we just play a really crazy show with no giant stage and no barrier or dumb, anything like that. It's fucking awesome. And it's really cool because playing both sides of that coin, I've come to appreciate both, more and more. And as far as the big stage thing goes, it was something we had to get used to. But honestly, if the big stage is right and the sound is crushing, it's kind of really fucking fun to play a big stage, because the sound is really good, and the PAs, like, sometimes these are like $1 million sound system in some stupid ass club, but it's like a crazy sound system, and the subs are just like pushing so much air, and it can sound crushing. Like, I love seeing the Body's a great band, small or big stage, because if you see them on a big stage, it could kill you. It's fucking awesome. Yeah, it's really cool. So, and these bigger tours have been a huge treat, because we've always toured DIY, and there's some stress that goes along with that, because it's like, is anybody going to come see us? Like, are we going to get paid, or how is this going to go? And on these tours, you don't have to worry about anything. Everything's set up. We're not in charge. So, I don't know. There's just less responsibility in that sense. And you get to play to a whole new crowd of people. And like on this most recent run with Max and Igor Cavalera, they were doing Sepultura songs, so it was Sepultura fans and Immolation fans. Immolation was the direct. That was a pretty big tour for us. Maybe the biggest we'd ever gotten. And it was like a dream come true, honestly. There was definitely a challenge every night, because I think when you tour with a band with like a 30-40 year reputation like that, their fans are diehards, and they have a huge fan base, and it's kind of like, who the fuck are we to be on this stage as well? So, I mean, those people bought, $25, $30 tickets to see Immolation and Sepultura play. But, so you're the opener, and you really got to play hard for them to pay attention to you. And sometimes I'm sure there's like a big percentage of them that were just kind of like, whatever. But honestly, it was really positive, as far as we could see. It went really well for us. And it was the same thing with the Entomb tour, and we toured with a black metal band called 1349. That was really fucking great, too. And it actually was surprising how well we worked with a black metal band, like a bigger corpse-painted black metal band. Yeah. I would love to do something like that again.
Maybe do a full kind of corpse paint tour yourselves.
Yeah, that was actually I had a band when I was like 14 or 15 where we did do that.
Brilliant.
So I think that was my one-time corpse painting. I don't think I'm going to do it anymore.
No. Obviously, you mentioned the kind of tour with the Sepultura guys doing the whole Roots show. For one, kind of, how was that experience to kind of see them do that album night in, night out? And secondly, how did that opportunity come about for you guys?
Well, watching them play every night was incredible because those brothers, you can just tell by watching them that they love what they're doing. I mean, those guys are still so inspired, and you know, it's something to watch two like serious legends just jamming together and just loving every minute of it. And they just get so into it, and they're such good performers. Igor is such a fucking good drummer.
Yeah.
Max is such a good frontman. It's awesome. It gives you chills, really, because, you know, and honestly, I have to say as well, watching Immolation was like a huge privilege, because that's like a seriously legendary death metal band who's still so extreme and so fucking awesome live, and they're so down to earth, like zero ego. They just get in and get it done, and they're just, you know, very approachable, very cool people. So that's like, you know, two heavyweight bands where it's just like, holy shit, these guys are the real deal.
Yeah.
So, you know, that's like very inspiring for us. We can only, you know, hope that, you know, our band stays together and we get to keep releasing records and that we keep it real like those guys would. Because, I don't know, they're fucking awesome, man. And how it came about. Well, basically, we met one of Max's sons.
Oh,
Igor.
okay.
Yeah, we met him at a show in Florida, and we didn't know who he was either. We found out soon after, but we just became friends. And he said his dad was into us, and we sent him some merch, and you know, we just kind of kept in touch. And every time we'd go out to Arizona, we would stay at their house and
That's awesome.
hang out with them. And they would always say, like, you know, we're gonna take you on tour. We're gonna take you on tour. And that's not something I would hold to heart, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
Because it seems so surreal, like, no way.
Yeah.
But it came through one day, and, you know, that whole family is so amazing. Like, Gloria, very, very helpful, and I don't know, it was just, overall, just a surreal experience. I don't know, it's one I don't think we'll ever forget.
And something else that I wanted to talk about with you is again, kind of going back to the early days of Full of Hell. But was this almost like everything that you guys put out? There was kind of the tag or slogan, so to say, of the whole "Numb Your Mind" kind of thing. So where did that kind of come about? Because I think again, from seeing you guys, it was quite an iconic thing to see, almost like the treble clef with the cross through it, and then "Numb Your Mind." It was quite a standing image. So, can you talk me through how that kind of came about?
Well, the music note with the X over it is a really popular little sign. I mean, a ton of grindcore and noise people have used it over the years. I'm not even sure who used it first. I'm sure Spencer would know.
Yeah.
He came up with the little tagline "Numb Your Mind." I think it has a lot to do with just maybe like the sonic nature of the music for one thing. Like that's the double meaning, but also just like self-medicating in the face of your pain. You know, it's kind of personal, but yeah, I mean, it's got a very literal meaning, and it happens to have a nice double meaning for the pulverizing sonic tone.
Cool. And how I like to end these little chats is to kind of bring it back to the live experience for you guys. So when you guys are, obviously I know you've got the new record coming out, so this might be a little bit different in a couple of months' time, but when you're playing live, is there one particular song for you personally that when you play it, like everything just clicks, and that's like the favourite song that you love playing live?
Although the new record?
Well, just in general in your set.
I guess there's a few, but although the new record in particular, we've been playing this song "Branches of You" live, and it just slams really hard, and it just sounds like really. I feel like it really sums up like the kind of death grind vibe on the record, and it just rhythmically just really hits me right, and I like the vocal rhythms. It's really fun to sing. So I suppose that one. You know, it's only 50 seconds though, so it's like 50 seconds of yeah, this is awesome. But you know, they're all fun to play. I mean, it's funny because generally, if I'm not vibing with a song, Spencer's probably definitely not vibing with it, so we don't play it anymore live. So our sets stay pretty fresh for us, at least.
Yeah.
We only, you know, we've written a lot of songs, so we only really have to play what we really want to play.
Cool.
So generally, I vibe through the whole time.
Cool.
But you know, all of the new stuff, I'm super excited to start playing because I've only been playing a couple of the songs. And obviously, with any band, they're most excited to play their new stuff.
Yeah, of course.
Right.
Cool. Is there anything else that you'd like to particularly shout about yourself, Dylan?
Not particularly.
No, perfect. Well, Dylan, thank you very much for taking the time to speak to me. I'm hopefully going to be catching you guys in Bristol this time round when you're over. So yeah, really looking forward to seeing you and looking forward to hearing the new record as well.
Yeah, can't wait, man. Thanks for the interview.
No worries. Cheers. Take care.
Yeah, take care, man. See ya.
So there you have it, folks. Thanks again to Dylan for taking the time to talk to me. It was really interesting to hear about how they kind of view their workload, because as I mentioned during the chat, it's like they're constantly kind of putting stuff out, and as Dylan mentioned, their guitarist Spencer just kind of keeps churning things out. So yeah, it's really cool that they're constantly putting out music, and really looking forward to hearing part 2 of a potential collaboration with The Body, because the last record they did with those guys was fucking awesome. Trumpeting Ecstasy is set to come out on May 5th. After we recorded this episode, the band actually announced that they'll be touring Mexico for the first time. So that tour will run from May 3rd through to May 8th. They're also going to be doing an extensive European and UK tour, which starts on June 22nd in Stuttgart and finishes on July 18th in Bristol, which is the show I'm hoping to go to. So I'll probably see a very tired Dylan and the rest of the guys, but I'm sure they'll kill it as always. As always, you can keep up to date with the band over on different forms of social media. I'm not sure if they've got Twitter and Instagram, but Facebook's the one they kind of put most of the things out on. So it's just facebook.com/fullofhell. As always, you can follow this show on Twitter, which is at just_and_insight, using the hashtag JAIPod. Next week, it's going to be a little bit different, throwing things out there, trying different things with this podcast. So looking to introduce a new monthly feature, which I'm titling My Favourite Wrestler. You'll find out a bit more about that when we go into it next week with my first guest. So yeah, keep an eye out for that episode when that drops. Also, I know I've already plugged my band once on this show, but we're playing Washed Out Festival in Brighton on Saturday, with loads of other rad bands across loads of different venues in Brighton. So it's not just me plugging my band. I think that festival is the first year they're doing it, and they've been really ambitious with it. So if you're in Brighton this weekend, please go support that festival, because it's always cool to have new rad things coming out. And if you do so happen to come see me, come say hi, come hang out. It'd be cool. But anyway, for now, ladies and gentlemen, thank you once again for joining me on the Just an Insight podcast, and I will see you soon.